Ever wonder how fast a peaceful moment can become a nightmare in the wild? 1 second, it's a selfie with a shark. Next, it's a fatal mistake. From jet ski rides turned tiger shark ambushes to a boy fighting a great white to save his sister, these stories reveal how quickly calm can turn to chaos. In this video, we uncover 6 real predator encounters that end in terror, survival, or tragedy. On June 28, 2025, the cold waves of Gansbaai, South Africa, moved gently under the rising sun. Boats floated near the shark diving zone, a popular spot for people looking to see great white sharks up close. Among the visitors that day was 24-year-old Yulia Vostrikova, a well-known TikTok influencer from Russia. Yulia had made a name for herself by posting bold videos from wild and risky places. Her followers loved the way she combined fashion, fearlessness, and viral challenges. This trip to South Africa was part of a new series she had planned, focusing on ocean life and extreme stunts. Yulia arrived with a small team. She had carefully planned her shoot to coincide with peak shark activity. Her goal was to capture something rare and shocking, something no one else had done. She had seen viral clips of people lightly touching sharks on the snout, with captions claiming it made the animals calm. These short videos, though often edited or staged, had convinced her to try the same. She believed this moment would bring her millions of views and even more fame. The boat crew explained the rules before anyone approached the edge. The sharks were wild and safety was the top priority. Most people stayed back, content with watching from a distance. But Yulia wanted something more. She wore a bright wetsuit and stood near the front of the boat, ready with her phone and camera rig. Her team set up angles while the guides watched closely. The water below was dark and deep, with shadows shifting beneath it. Soon a large shape appeared. A great white shark, longer than a car, swam slowly around the boat. Its wide body moved with ease, and its dorsal fin cut the surface like a blade. People gasped and stepped back, but Yulia leaned in. She raised her phone with one hand and stretched her other hand forward, aiming to place her fingers on the tip of the shark's snout. For a moment, everything was quiet. The shark came closer, rising slightly toward the surface. Then, without warning, it lunged upward. Its jaws opened wide and snapped shut on Yulia's wrist. The force pulled her forward, and blood sprayed across the side of the boat. Screams filled the air. The animal thrashed once, then sank back below, leaving red swirls in its wake. Yulia collapsed to the deck, her hand torn and hanging. Her eyes were wide with shock. Crew members and her team rushed to her side, pressing towels to stop the bleeding. The air was full of panic, and someone called for help on the radio. The boat turned sharply toward land, racing back as fast as possible. Time was against them. The injury was deep and the blood loss was growing worse. The group could only hope help would arrive in time. The boat sped across the open sea, with the crew staying close to Yulia. Her body lay still, wrapped in soaked towels. One person held pressure on her arm, while another tried to keep her conscious. The color had left her face, and her eyes blinked slowly. The blood had not stopped. The open wound had caused more damage than anyone first thought. The team tried to talk to her, to keep her focused, but her body had started to shut down. Her breathing grew faint as the boat reached the edge of the harbor. Paramedics waited on the dock with a stretcher and gear. As soon as the vessel reached shore, they carefully lifted Yulia and placed her on a stretcher. An oxygen mask was placed over her face. One medic kept her head steady while the others checked her pulse and started fluids. They moved fast through the narrow pier to reach the waiting ambulance. The road to the nearest hospital was clear, but the delay at sea had already taken its toll. Inside the emergency room, doctors rushed her into surgery. They worked to stop the bleeding and repair the torn muscles and vessels. The bite had crushed parts of her wrist and hand, and large veins had been destroyed. Though the team tried everything, Yulia's heart weakened during the process. After hours of care, the doctors could not restart her heart. At just 24, her life ended from a single bite that lasted only seconds. News of her death spread quickly. People online shared shock and sadness, while others argued about safety and responsibility. Some blamed the guides for not stopping her. Others pointed to the internet culture that encourages people to engage in dangerous activities for the sake of gaining views. Clips of Yulia's past stunts resurfaced, showing instances when she had taken risks in remote locations. Friends remembered her as brave and full of energy, but many admitted they had feared something like this could happen one day. Officials in the area reviewed the rules for boat tours. They met with dive companies and safety teams to discuss more effective warnings and stricter limits. New signs were added at ports telling visitors not to touch or feed wildlife. Guides were asked to give clear instructions before every trip and to stop anyone who crossed the safety line. Marine experts also spoke out. They explained that great white sharks are not calm animals and should never be touched. The idea of touching a shark's snout to calm it was false. These ideas had spread through short videos with no science behind them. The experts warned that mixing facts and fiction could cause real harm, as it had in this case. Yulia's family held a small ceremony back in Russia. Her parents thanked those who tried to save her and asked others to be more careful. Her page remained online, filled with her last videos and photos. People left messages, some filled with sorrow, while others carried a sense of regret. The sea stayed quiet after that day, but her story stayed loud in memory. A single mistake, fueled by a false belief, had turned deadly. The water had offered beauty, but also danger. And for those who follow, her story became a warning that nature is never a toy to be played with. On August 2nd, 2025, heavy clouds rolled over the Gulf of Mexico as strong winds began to build. Far from shore, 5 fishermen were making their way back to land after a long morning at sea. Among them was Carlos Mendoza, a 43-year-old father of 2 who had spent most of his life fishing. He came from a small town near Corpus Christi and had grown up learning the patterns of the ocean. His friends on the boat, Luis, Victor, Raul, and Jose, were all seasoned fishermen as well, each with years of experience facing sun, salt, and sudden storms. They had launched early that morning, chasing snapper near a reef known for good catches during the season. By midday, they had filled their coolers and were ready to return home. But dark clouds moved in fast. A sudden storm formed above them, far quicker than their weather apps had warned. The sky turned gray, then black. Waves grew taller, and the wind became sharp and cold. The small boat rocked hard with each swell. Water splashed over the sides, and the group moved quickly to secure gear. The wind swallowed shouts. One wave lifted the front of the boat so high it nearly flipped. In that moment, Carlos slipped on the wet floor and lost his balance. A strong push from behind sent him over the edge and into the crashing water. The others screamed and scrambled. Ropes were thrown, but the boat was moving fast, and Carlos had drifted several feet away. His head bobbed in and out of view. The sea was angry, the water rough. Carlos tried to swim, but the strong current pulled him in different directions. Then, something else moved beneath him. Without warning, a 9-foot bull shark came out of the deep and struck. It bit hard into Carlos's leg, shaking its head as blood poured into the water. The pain shot through his body, making it hard to breathe. He kicked wildly, trying to escape. The shark circled back and struck again, tearing deeper into muscle. The water turned red. Back on the boat, his friends saw the blood and knew time was short. Luis grabbed a gaff hook while Jose tied a rope to a life ring. They tossed it as close as they could. Carlos reached out weakly, barely able to hold on. The shark brushed past him again, but the crew continued to shout, hitting the water with poles to scare it off. With one final pull, Raul and Victor dragged Carlos toward the boat. The shark didn't follow. Together, the men lifted him over the side, his leg badly damaged and bleeding fast. He fell to the floor with a thud, groaning in pain. The shark was gone, but the danger was far from over. Rain still poured as the crew began first aid. A belt was tied tight around his thigh. They used shirts to press against the wound. Carlos was alive, but they all knew that the next hour would decide everything. Waves rocked the boat as Carlos lay on the floor, shaking and soaked. His pants were torn open and dark blood still oozed through the cloth pressed to his thigh. Luis stayed beside him, keeping steady pressure on the wound. Raul moved to the radio system and called for emergency help. Static filled the line, but he kept trying, giving their location and reporting the injury. Every second passed like a minute. The men worked in silence, eyes locked on their friend who faded in and out of awareness. Jose brought fresh towels from the storage box and placed one under Carlos's head. Victor checked the belt again to ensure it held firmly around the upper leg. The weather still howled, but the wind was starting to ease. Water pooled near the back of the boat, but the engine continued to run. The group knew help would take time, but they had done all they could. 35 minutes after the call, a sound came from above. A rescue helicopter appeared through the clouds. It hovered over the small vessel, and a winch lowered a medic with a stretcher. The team guided the stretcher over, working fast but carefully in the bouncing water. Carlos was placed gently onto it. The medic secured straps around his chest and legs, then gave a signal. The winch lifted him slowly, spinning slightly as he rose toward the waiting chopper. The boat rocked as the wind from the rotors pushed down. Once Carlos was safely inside, the helicopter tilted and pulled away. The crew stood in silence for a moment, watching as the sound faded. They began cleaning the floor and storing the used bandages. Their friend was no longer with them, but each man felt his own heart racing from what had just happened. At the hospital, a team of doctors waited. Carlos was taken into surgery immediately. The shark had damaged muscles, tendons, and veins. Surgeons worked for hours to clean the area and save the leg. Blood was given to replace what had been lost. The operation ended just before sunset. He survived, but recovery would be long. Back at the docks, news of the storm and the attack spread quickly. Local fishermen shared stories of close calls and hidden danger during rough weather. The Coast Guard released a report about the event and warned boaters to avoid dumping fish waste in open waters, as it could bring large animals too close. New signs were placed in harbors reminding crews to stay alert during stormy conditions. Carlos spent 2 weeks in the hospital. His leg remained wrapped, and walking would take months. He thanked the workers who saved his life. His friends visited often, bringing food and quiet company. The sea had shown its power that day. Though he would fish again, Carlos said he would never ignore a warning sky. What happened on that boat would never be forgotten. On August 4, 2025, the waters of Palau shimmered under soft morning light as Marcus Shaw prepared for one of his most awaited dives. At 33 years old, Marcus had spent nearly half his life exploring the sea. Born in Florida, he began diving at the age of 16 and became a certified dive instructor by the time he was 20. He was also a skilled underwater photographer, renowned for capturing images of rare marine species in remote and hard-to-reach locations. His dream had always been to show the beauty of the ocean while helping others understand its risks. This trip to Blue Corner, a renowned dive site in Palau, was part of a project aimed at documenting shark behavior near the reef. Marcus and his dive buddy Jonah had reviewed maps and discussed their plan before entering the water. The site was known for its strong currents and sharp cave systems, but Marcus had been in tighter spots before. With cameras mounted to his gear and a powerful flashlight in hand, he moved carefully toward a narrow underwater cave near the edge of the reef. Inside, the walls were rough and close, filled with small gaps in jagged stone. The goal was to record deep-sea creatures that rarely came near the open reef. As Marcus swam further into the cave, his flashlight beam swept across the coral, revealing hidden fish. Air bubbles drifted upward in small streams. The space around him grew tighter, and he had to shift sideways to fit through a narrow turn. His gear brushed against the walls, and one of his straps got caught. He tugged gently to loosen it while keeping his light steady. Without warning, a large shape moved fast from the dark corner ahead. A gray reef shark, nearly 6 feet long, darted forward. The animal had likely been resting inside the cave and became agitated by the light and sound. It opened its jaws and lunged directly at Marcus, biting deep into his upper thigh. The sharp teeth tore through his wetsuit, cutting into the muscle underneath. Marcus kicked hard, but the tight space left him with little room to move. The shark thrashed, pulling him further into the cave. His back hit the rocks and his breathing grew louder inside his mask. Blood began to fill the water. His hand reached out toward Jonah, who was just behind him, but the narrow tunnel blocked access. Jonah pushed forward and used a metal stick to try to distract the shark. Marcus tried to pull back, but his other strap was stuck again. His camera floated out of reach. The shark bit again before Jonah jammed the stick near its mouth. It let go for a moment, but the cave was still tight, and the current had picked up. Air was running low. Visibility dropped as dust and red mist swirled around them. The fight to escape was far from over. Jonah stayed close as the cloud of blood grew thicker in the narrow cave. He moved with care, avoiding sharp edges as he reached for Marcus again. The shark had vanished into the darkness, but tension filled the space. Marcus's leg was badly damaged, and his gear was still caught on the jagged rocks. His air tank was nearly empty, and every second felt heavier than the last. Jonah grabbed the stuck strap and gave a sharp pull. The buckle finally slipped loose, freeing Marcus from the tight grip of the cave wall. They turned and began swimming toward the open reef. Marcus struggled to kick, dragging one leg behind. Jonah moved beside him, guiding the way with short signals. The flashlight flickered behind them, but they did not turn back. Ahead, the blue light of the surface peeked through shifting waves. Marcus's wound left a trail in the water, but no movement followed. The gray reef shark was gone for now. They rose slowly, following safety steps to avoid pressure damage. The minutes felt long, but both men stayed focused. At last, they reached the surface. Waves rolled gently around them. Their support boat had spotted the trail of air bubbles and was moving closer. Crew members pulled them on board without delay. Marcus collapsed on the deck, pale and weak. His wetsuit was soaked in red, and the deep gash on his leg exposed muscle and torn skin. A team member wrapped his leg tightly using clean fabric and firm bandages. Others kept his head still and spoke in a calm voice. An emergency kit was opened, and pain relief was applied. Jonah sat beside Marcus, holding a cloth against the injury. The boat moved quickly toward the harbor, where medical help was already waiting. Once on land, Marcus was lifted onto a stretcher and carried into a small care center near the dock. Doctors cleaned the wound and began urgent treatment. The shark's bite had missed major arteries but damaged nerves and tissue. Marcus was awake but in shock. He was moved to a larger facility by ambulance for surgery. There, a team of experts worked to repair the damage and reduce the risk of infection. Over several days, he rested under careful watch, receiving fluids and medicine through tubes. Movement returned slowly, but pain remained. News of the accident spread through the diving community. People discussed the risks of entering narrow reef caves without clear exits. Some experts warned against using strong lights in dark zones where animals might feel trapped. Others emphasized the need for improved training in confined spaces. The footage from Marcus's gear was recovered and used to study the shark's reaction. Researchers said it had likely felt cornered and struck out of fear, not hunger. Marcus spent weeks in recovery. He began walking again with support and continued therapy for muscle control. He later gave talks to new divers, sharing his story as a warning. The sea was beautiful but never safe. The cave, once seen as a goal, had taught him the true cost of pressure and pride. On August 3, 2025, the coast of Cape Fear, North Carolina experienced warm skies and light wind. The beach was busy with visitors enjoying the clear water and open sky. Not far from the shore, 27-year-old Emma Collins guided her jet ski across the small waves. Emma was a strong athlete and worked as a swimming coach in a nearby town. Born and raised in North Carolina, she had spent most of her life near the ocean. On weekends, she often rode her jet ski alone, finding peace in the quiet movement of the sea. Emma was familiar with the coast and followed safety rules closely. She wore a full wetsuit, carried a small waterproof radio, and kept her eyes on the water ahead. That morning, she had launched from a local dock after checking the tides. The sea was mostly calm, and the tide was just beginning to pull out. She cruised past the outer markers and turned toward a deeper channel. Nearby boats stayed clear, and the coast remained peaceful. As she rode farther, her jet ski hit a patch of rough waves created by a hidden sandbar. The shallow spot caught the front of her craft and lifted it into the air. In one quick motion, Emma was thrown forward, landing hard in the water. She hit the surface with a splash and sank before rising again, coughing and trying to stay calm. The jet ski floated several feet away, its engine off. She turned to swim back, but her leg struck something in the sand. As she stood, the water reached her waist, and her movement caused strong vibrations through the shallow current. From deeper water, a tiger shark sensed the motion and sound. It moved quickly through the shifting tide, drawn toward the noise and disturbance. Emma stepped forward again, unaware of what swam nearby. Then with sudden force, the shark rose from below and latched onto her right thigh. Its teeth dug deep through the wetsuit and skin, tearing across the muscle. The pain came fast. Emma screamed and fell sideways. The shark shook its head hard, pulling at her leg and spinning the water with each movement. Her hands pushed against its side as she kicked with her free leg, trying to fight back. She splashed and twisted, hoping to scare it off. The splashing caught the attention of a small fishing boat anchored not far from the sandbar. The crew saw the movement and sped toward the source of the noise. As they approached, they slammed their hands on the side of the hull, making loud sounds that echoed across the surface. The shark loosened its grip and slipped away into deeper water. Emma floated, weak and bleeding. Her leg was torn, and the wound ran deep. The nearby boat pulled close. The men reached out and lifted her slowly over the edge. She lay still, shaking as blood covered her wetsuit. Her breathing was fast and her voice was low. The engine roared as the boat turned sharply toward the closest dock. The worst was not over yet. The boat rushed toward land as Emma lay still on the wooden floor, her body shaking from cold and pain. One of the men placed a folded cloth under her leg while another used a first aid box to cover the torn area. The injury ran deep from her upper thigh to just above the knee. Thick red lines soaked the fabric as they wrapped bandages around the damaged part, working with care to slow the bleeding. The wound had opened across muscle and the skin hung in torn strips. Her breathing grew softer, but her eyes stayed open, watching the sky above. They passed the first buoy and reached the harbor in less than 15 minutes. A call had already been made, and emergency workers stood ready with stretchers and medical tools. The boat was met by paramedics who gently lifted Emma from the deck. A soft blanket was placed over her body while pressure was kept on the leg. The blood flow had lessened, but her skin looked pale, and her lips had turned light blue. The dock area fell silent as people watched from a distance, unsure of what had happened. At the nearest hospital, the trauma team began treatment without delay. The bite had missed the major artery but had crushed soft tissue and broken part of the thigh bone. Doctors cleaned the area, removed damaged flesh, and used many stitches to hold the skin together. Fluids were given through a thin tube to help her body stay strong. Pain medicine helped calm her heart rate, and warm pads were placed to raise her temperature. The surgery lasted for 2 hours. By late evening, Emma was resting in a recovery room. Her family had arrived after hearing the news. The doctors said she would need more time to heal and might need physical therapy to walk normally again. The bite had caused deep trauma, but her calm thinking and the fast help from nearby people had saved her life. News of the attack spread through the town. Local news channels shared updates about the event, and online pages posted warnings about shallow zones near Cape Fear. People who had witnessed the rescue from their boats provided statements about what they heard and how quickly the shark had reacted. Experts from the Marine Safety Office discussed shark movement near sandbars and explained how sound and splashing can attract them. Signs were added near public ramps to remind visitors of the risks associated with making fast turns near shallow areas. New maps showed where tiger sharks had been seen most often. Tour guides updated their safety talks to include warnings about water sports during early afternoon hours when the heat raises water activity. Emma stayed in care for several weeks. She learned to move her leg again with help from a support frame and slow exercises. Though the pain remained for a while, she never lost hope. Her story became a reminder for others to respect sea life, watch for quiet dangers, and always follow safe rules while near the ocean. On July 29, 2025, the sun rose bright over the waters near Tofo, Mozambique. The waves sparkled and the air was warm. A luxury yacht floated calmly near the shore. On board were the Ivanov family, visiting from Eastern Europe for a special vacation. The parents had planned the trip to give their 2 children, Elena and Nikolai, a break before the start of the new school year. Elena, 16, was smart and curious. She loved reading, art, and exploring new places. Her younger brother, Nikolai, was 14, full of energy and always ready to try something exciting. They were close, always playing games and sharing laughs. Their parents had booked the trip to enjoy peace on the ocean. The yacht was large and modern, featuring spacious sleeping quarters, a large deck, and safety equipment on board. The crew included trained staff who handled the boat and helped with meals and equipment. The area near Tofo was renowned for its beauty, crystal clear water, and diverse marine life. Many visitors came to see whales, dolphins, and a variety of colorful fish. That morning, Elena and Nikolai stood near the edge of the yacht, splashing each other and laughing. The sea looked calm at first, with only small waves bumping against the side. The crew had warned everyone not to get too close to the edge, but the teens were having fun and didn't think danger was near. As they leaned over the rail, a strong wave came from behind. The water lifted quickly and crashed against the boat. The force was too strong. Both Elena and Nikolai lost balance and fell over the side. Their parents screamed as the teens hit the water hard. Splashes and shouts followed, and crew members rushed to throw ropes and life rings. Beneath the surface, the noise and movement reached far. A large great white shark swimming nearby felt the sudden change. It moved toward the sound fast. The shark rose through the water, drawn by the quick splashes and the shaking of the sea. Before anyone could stop it, the shark reached Elena first. Its wide jaws opened and snapped around her leg. The teeth cut deep through the skin and muscle. The shark twisted sharply, tearing part of her wetsuit and dragging her sideways. She kicked and tried to stay afloat. As she raised her arm to push away, the shark bit again, this time across her forearm. Blood spread quickly into the sea. Nikolai saw his sister in pain and swam toward her. He tried to pull her closer to the ropes from the boat. As he reached for her, the shark turned and bit into his upper back. The force knocked him forward, but he continued to move. He grabbed Elena's shoulder and tried to guide her toward a floating ring. The crew acted fast. One man used a long pole to splash near the shark. Another threw more ropes into the water. Their father shouted for help while their mother held onto the rail. Elena's body floated near the surface, bleeding badly, and Nikolai's arm wrapped around her as he tried to stay above water. The shark circled once more before fading into the deep, but the damage had been done. Blood drifted in soft clouds around them as the crew moved quickly. 2 team members grabbed the ropes tied to the life rings and pulled with all their strength. Another person leaned over the side and reached out with a hooked pole. Nikolai's grip on his sister began to loosen as his arm weakened, but he held on. Together, they were dragged slowly toward the yacht. When their bodies reached the side, the staff worked in silence. One person lifted Nikolai first, wrapping both arms around his chest and pulling him over the rail. His face was pale and his shoulder showed a deep tear with skin peeled back. Another helper grabbed Elena under her arms and lifted her next. Her leg hung limp with visible muscle and torn skin. Her hand bled as well, marked with several small holes. The deck became a place of urgency. Towels and jackets were placed under their heads. Someone pressed fabric over Elena's wounds to slow the bleeding. Others cut away wet clothes and wrapped gauze around the worst areas. Nikolai's cut was wide but not as deep. He stayed awake and blinked often. His sister lay still, breathing in short gasps. The parents sat beside them, holding their hands and whispering. One of the workers rushed to the radio to contact emergency services. A signal was sent with the yacht's position, and the reply came back fast. Help was on the way, but the trip from shore would take time. A rescue chopper was being sent from a coastal hospital. A large towel was placed under Elena's head. Ice was brought from the cooler and used to reduce swelling. Her mouth opened slightly, but she made no sound. A soft cloth was placed over her eyes to shield her from the sun. Nikolai was given water and told to keep still. One of the crew wrapped his shoulder tightly with a clean band. Above the boat, the sound of blades began to grow louder. The helicopter came into view and the crew got ready. A rope with a basket stretcher was lowered slowly. The staff helped lift Elena first. They secured straps over her body, careful not to press the injuries. Once ready, the rope was pulled and she rose into the air, her body swaying gently as the wind pushed around her. Nikolai followed next. Though his wounds were less serious, he had lost strength. He sat in the stretcher, holding the side rails as the basket rose beside his sister. Both were placed into the aircraft, which turned and moved away toward the distant shoreline. At the hospital, doctors worked quickly. Elena was brought into a trauma room where a team of surgeons treated her injuries. She had lost a lot of blood and needed stitches, cleaning, and medicine. Nikolai was taken to a smaller room where his shoulder was cleaned and bandaged. After several days of care, both siblings began to show improvement. Elena needed help to walk, and Nikolai wore a sling for weeks. Their parents stayed close, helping them recover. The memory of the shark stayed strong. Warnings near boats were updated. Families near Tofo paid more attention to safety. The sea had shown its danger, and the lesson would not be forgotten. On August 6, 2025, the calm waters of the Adelaide River shimmered under the midday sun. Lucas Bennett, a 36-year-old wildlife photographer from Brisbane, stood near the edge of a small family boat. His love for nature had started in childhood. He grew up near forests and spent weekends exploring trails with his grandfather, who taught him how to use a camera. Over time, Lucas turned his hobby into a full-time career. He traveled across Australia, capturing rare animals and quiet moments in wild places. His photos were used in books, websites, and conservation campaigns. Lucas had brought his wife, young daughter, and parents on this trip. It was meant to be a relaxing break from his usual fast-paced work. They had rented a small motorboat and planned to spend the day slowly cruising along the mangroves, hoping to spot birds and reptiles from a safe distance. Lucas had visited the Adelaide River before, but this was the first time he had done so with his entire family. He wanted to show them the beauty he often saw through his lens. The river was quiet that day. The only sounds were birds overhead and the soft hum of the motor. The sun made patterns on the muddy water. The boat moved gently through narrow channels lined with trees whose roots twisted down into the water. Lucas stood at the side, holding his camera with one hand and adjusting the lens with the other. He leaned slightly over the edge, trying to focus on a bird hidden between branches. Below the surface, something moved without warning. A giant saltwater crocodile, longer than the boat itself, shot upward from the brown water. In a flash, it opened its huge jaws and grabbed Lucas's right arm. The force lifted him off his feet and pulled him down. A loud splash broke the quiet, followed by gasps from his family. Water flew in every direction as the animal thrashed. Lucas disappeared under the water in seconds. His camera sank fast, still strapped to his body. The river rippled as bubbles and bits of mud rose to the surface. The boat rocked from side to side as his father grabbed a long stick and reached into the water. His wife screamed and held their child close while trying to see any movement. The crocodile twisted below, dragging its catch into the deep. No sound came from Lucas. Only waves hit the side of the boat. His mother shouted for help while his daughter cried and looked over the edge. The quiet river had become a scene of fear and panic. The once peaceful outing was now a nightmare from which no one could escape. The engine was restarted, and the boat sped toward the nearest dock. A call for help was made through a phone on board. People nearby were alerted and emergency services were contacted. The river was now still again, but one person was missing. The worst had happened, and no one knew what would be found next. The boat reached the dock fast, but help had not yet arrived. Lucas's family stepped onto the wooden platform, wet and shaking. His wife held their child tightly while his parents stood silently, their faces pale. A ranger from a nearby park station was the first to respond. He requested details and began organizing a search. More boats were called in, and teams with experience in local animal tracking joined within an hour. The water near the attack was marked with flags. Several groups scanned the banks, hoping to find any clues. Drones flew above, and sonar equipment was used to look below. The teams worked until nightfall but found nothing. There was no sign of the man or the animal. The river had swallowed both. The next morning, more help came. Police units, divers, and rescue teams from other regions arrived. The weather stayed clear and they searched again. Boats moved slowly through each narrow path. They checked the tree roots and small inlets. Helicopters circled above and cameras recorded everything. But still the river stayed quiet. Only the sounds of insects and birds filled the air. 3 days passed. On the 4th day, a torn piece of camera gear was found. It was deeply buried in the mud. Experts confirmed it matched the brand Lucas had used. The discovery led to a new area of focus, but no body or further items were recovered. The water near the location was deep and full of hidden turns. Search leaders agreed that the chances of finding more were very low. Back at home, the news spread quickly. Photos of Lucas taken from past trips were featured on various websites and news pages. People remembered him as calm, kind, and careful with every step he took in nature. His work had shown others how to respect animals and treat wild places with care and respect. Groups he had worked with sent messages of sadness and support. His family returned home after a week. A private gathering was held where friends and co-workers shared memories. A picture of Lucas was placed beside some of his best photos. Stories were told about his travels and the things he had taught people through his lens. The family thanked everyone who helped in the search. In the weeks that followed, warning signs were added along more parts of the river. Local leaders reminded people to stay back from the edge and avoid leaning over the sides of boats. Guides were instructed to implement additional safety measures on all wildlife tours. Some groups requested additional rules regarding boat size and activity in the most hazardous parts of the river. A nature center nearby built a small display in his honor. It showed photos he had taken and told the story of what happened. It reminded visitors that even calm places could hold hidden risks. Lucas was never found, but his work and memory remained. His life was a reminder that wild places are not always safe, and that even the most careful person can be taken in an instant.